Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, co-editor-in-chief with Retail Insider, taking care of retail business today with Bruce Winder, one of the top retail experts in Canada. Thanks, Bruce, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the program, Ariel.
Well, let's talk about the retail sector over the holiday period. And what are some of the things you've been hearing about how the holiday shopping season went for the retail industry this year?
Yeah, I think this year was a very challenging year for many retailers. There's certain retailers who did, I think, pretty well, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But for the most part, I've never seen a year with so many challenges built into it. And it really started with the consumer, right? The consumer was incredibly frugal going into this year, looking for sales, lots of headwinds the consumer's facing from a rent, food, you name it standpoint, right, to make ends meet. Black Friday, I heard, was sort of a little bit soft, overall. And part of that is because Black Friday, as you know, and Cyber Monday is spread among many, many days and weeks and has really become a month-long event. But there was some information from Salesforce that was shared that showed that Black Friday was a little softer, at least online. And then we had the Canada Post strike, and the Canada Post strike was absolutely brutal. It dragged on for a month, I think, at least. And a lot of small companies got hit hard with that because they couldn't ship. Or if they did ship with another courier, in some cases it was 200 to 300% more.
Yeah.
So I think they're probably the hardest hit overall this year. And then we saw, December 20th was from Moneris and Interact predicted to be the top sales day, and that was the Friday before December 25th. We also saw another trend I noticed here was a fairly big movement toward some of the emerging apps like Temu. So Temu became the number one downloaded app in Canada last year, and a lot of people, because they're trying to save money, looked for these type of international marketplaces to try to save money. So that was something that's really different this year. Online shopping, I think, had a pretty good season overall, not for the independent folks who relied on Canada Post, but if you look at, like I said, Timo, you look at what Amazon has been doing. They have increased their infrastructure. They've got 70 plus warehouses, 46,000 people. They've invested. So I think a lot of consumers have sort of continued to push online shopping as a major trend. Some of the discounts, back to brick and mortar, some of the discounts that Salesforce talked about were a little bit, or I guess online and brick and mortar, they were a little softer. So some retailers played chicken a little bit with the consumer and didn't put their best foot forward on sale items for Black Friday. I think that hit them. Boxing Day was pretty interesting. Boxing Day looked like it was really busy from a foot traffic perspective in the malls. I think we were all surprised
Yeah.
that it was that busy. Another thing that was a real challenge this year, especially early on, was the the HST holiday.
Yeah.
Um, that created a firestorm with a lot of retailers trying to set up for that on such short notice.
Hmm.
And there was some confusion. Now, having said that, I've heard that it's been pretty decent in terms of giving a little bit of a bump for some retailers, particularly if you're in the categories affected, like the toys, video games, and children's clothing.
Yeah.
So there was a lot going on. It was a really challenging year. I expect that probably a little more than normal will go bankrupt. So you'll probably see some bankruptcies this month, probably a little more than normal. And remember, we don't always hear about bankruptcies. Small independent retailers just close their doors.
That's right.
So I think you're gonna, and we might see a surprise this year in terms of maybe a bigger company sort of scaling operations down or closing down. So real tough year, I think, overall for fall of 2024.
Let's talk about what you've heard in terms of the particular retailers or sectors in the retail industry that did well over this holiday period.
Sure. I think value did well. So if you're a value retailer and you're offering lower end products, like a Dollarama, a Walmart,
Yeah.
someone like an Amazon or a Temu, I think they did well. The value sector. I think some of the folks who struggled a bit, and we don't have any numbers yet, but are some of the folks who play at the mid to high end, not stratospheric luxury, but more sort of aspiring to the aspirational customer who's not really wealthy but wants to look wealthy. I think some of those companies are hurting. I think they had a bit of a tough time. Department stores, I think, had a real tough time as well. Folks like the Bay, we don't know what their numbers are. They're private, but they probably had a tough time. So if you were sort of at the value segment, you probably did well. If you were a hot brand, you did well. But a lot of folks at that mid to higher end probably had a bit of an off year just because the consumer is so frugal right now.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you touched a little bit on this just a few seconds ago, a few minutes ago. But we entered the season with some companies in trouble, right? And we had Stokes went into creditor protection, just prior to the holiday season. Here recently, there was an announcement about Toys R Us closing some stores and doing some work, I guess, inside other stores, etc. Um, what, without mentioning any names, like
Sure.
what in sectors of the retail industry in terms of retailers do you think are more in trouble right now as they head into 2025?
I would say folks who sell a lot of discretionary items are probably having a hard time.
Yeah,
Folks who sell essentials are going to be just fine. But if you're selling more the wants than the needs, the aspirational stuff, you're being left off the list. People aren't shopping for you, particularly if you're a company that sold those products at the mid to high end. I think you're going to be left out because there's just not a lot of room in consumers' budgets right now for a lot of discretionary items. People bought more essentials. And it's so case specific, Mario, too, as you know, in terms of the individual company. It depends on, who you're with. I mean, you look at someone like Toys R Us. Toys R Us is closing or will close a few stores. I think it's 5 stores.
yeah.
The toy industry is not a bad industry. It's a tough industry. But you look at someone like an Amazon, they continue to pick up share in the toy business. So even
Hmm.
though the sector might be not bad, if there's major gains within a new competitor or a different competitor, that can pose some problems for other retailers, some legacy retailers who've been in there for a while.
Yeah. Bruce, what do you expect from consumers in 2025?
I think we're going to see more of the same. I mean, there's obviously a tremendous amount of political uncertainty right now in two ways. One is within our own government,
Yeah,
based on the announcement of Prime Minister Trudeau stepping down. But there's also a significant issue, as you know and I know, happening in the US when President-elect Donald Trump gets in power in 13 days on the 20th. That he may literally the day he takes office or the next day put some fairly significant tariffs in place on Canadian goods, 25%. So if you're a Canadian company and you export to the US, that's gonna hurt you significantly. And that will put us into a recession if that happens long term. The other thing too is if we're probably going to see some inflation because Canada will retaliate and put duties on American products. So if you're a Canadian consumer, you're going to see our old friend inflation popping up again significantly based on cost of goods costing more, based on imports from the US. So I think it's going to be a bit of a tough year, particularly in the first half of the year until things get ironed out between the new Trump administration and whoever's running Canada. And
yeah,
obviously, we're going to have an election. I think the consumer remains a little frugal. I think, interest rates are coming down, which is great. Hopefully, the Bank of Canada continues to lower those a little bit. Inflation has been in check so far, but like I mentioned, it might pop up. And like I said, I think you're going to see some further consolidation in the industry. There might be a couple of surprises of people who bow out and no longer are operating in retail. And we're going to continue to see, international companies put their toe in Canada to try it out. Like Retail Insider publishes a lot of that about all the comings and goings of new companies coming into Canada. I think we're going to continue to see that. But definitely, I don't think 25 is going to be a fantastic year for retail. I think we're going to see more of the same in terms of, consumers watching their money, looking for discounts,
mm.
hunkering down a bit on money, and then we'll have to see what happens from a geopolitical standpoint.
So, in this kind of challenging environment for consumers, what do retailers have to do to succeed?
I think they have to really understand their consumer, depending on who they're selling to. if they're selling to that value consumer, take cost out of their business to continue to try to lower retail prices, and that's going to be hard, like I mentioned, based on the trade wars that are starting around the world. But that would be something, is to really offer tremendous value to the consumer. Know your consumer better than your competition. Use AI like you've never done before. Invest in it. Find out how to use it, and try to use that to offer incredibly relevant offers to your consumer. But it's all about who knows the consumer best and who can offer something that is incredibly relevant to the consumer at that point in time. So those are the things I would say. Run a low cost operation, and use AI like you've never used it before.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Bruce, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Miro. Have a great day.
You too. That was Bruce Winder, who is a top retail expert in Canada. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, co-editor in chief with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.